Welcome back to another NewsShooter.com panel here at the Teradek Live booth at NAB 2014. Today I've got a very illustrious panel up here. Andy, Ilya, Jason, Jem and Clinton Hahn on the end there. Today we're going to be talking about, is DSLR dead? We talked about this last year and the consensus was, I think Jason said it wasn't dead, but it was sitting on the fence about to fall off. Now are we seeing a renaissance now though with the introduction of the GH4 coming out, the A7S? Are we seeing a renaissance of that type of camera? I know they're not DSLRs per se because they're mirrorless, but are we seeing something like that? I'll start with you, Ilya.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think actually it's completely ever gone away, and I'm going to respectfully disagree with Jason. I don't think they've been sitting on the fence. If you go to trade shows and events and things all the time, you see DSLRs or mirrorless or similar type cameras, and I think the small form factor is here to stay. I think people love it.
Okay, Andy, from a dealer perspective, what are you seeing from your customers in terms of, are people still migrating towards smaller cameras? Are we moving away from that now?
We're seeing a pretty big trend away from the DSLR for the most part. Well, a direction, let's say. A lot of entry level coming in, get DSLR. A lot of people going to C100, smaller FS700 type cameras. From that, they're sort of graduating. They still have the DSLR. They're not giving it up. They're just sort of getting the other tool for, I don't know, more normal video type operation.
Okay, now Jason, I know you're a real fan of the small form factor, and you know you're looking for the unicorn, the white unicorn to come riding into the room.
Still am, but
with all the things. Is there anything that you've seen this year or any of the announcements made you change your mind about maybe that camera is coming closer and closer into your hand?
This is probably the closest, the Sony A7S or Alpha 7S, which I think, I mean, you talked about the whole, I don't think the form factor will die. I mean, there's a reason this is really, still important. It's all the more important now that the technology is caught up with the form factor that I can actually do this and with an electronic viewfinder, and the codec and the actual imagery is getting much, much better. This thing with the XAVCS, the codec is fantastic. It's beautiful to use. Focus peaking, I can get things sharp. I don't need to have extra additional monitors and rigs and things. This is you can shoot very comfortably, quite steadily on this thing. And a lot of my work is quite intimate, quite stealthy, quite, I need to be sort of sneaking into rooms, low light. I need to sort of, a lot of it is quite
and is the full
attuned to this
frame.
format.
I know you're a big exponent on
the other
gaffer at wide open, Wingrove as they call you. You're a big exponent of shooting everything wide open, and you love the full frame look. So
yeah, I mean, I think
it's getting close, this camera, isn't it?
Absolutely, it's getting close. I think there's probably the next step will be maybe if we start having some proper menus. Let's start having menus like a proper camera. Give me some shutter angles and give me, if this camera can do 50 frames and 60 frames, let me have it all and have a menu that's a little bit more like a proper camera, and we're getting close.
But you say proper camera, don't you think that the reason you keep saying that is because people just want to take what's in there and make it into a proper camera? I mean, that's what seems to be happening.
Well,
and no doubt Sony eventually will do that,
They're all
right?
very much stills cameras with a video mode.
Yeah.
And the video mode is very much being more front of mind with the developers and with the manufacturers.
Yeah, well, we look at like an iPhone being the most popular still camera today. Yeah. That's where they have to go with it, really.
But Sony have made the conscious effort to take a camera that exists and push it more towards the video side. Yet we're still stuck with, and same with the Canon 1DC, that is a cinema branded camera, yet the menus are stuck in 5 DSLR land. So but there's still some ways to go. Maybe we're toppling on one more side of the fence than the other.
Now, Jem, as an educator, I mean, I'm sure you're probably involved with a lot of people in teaching who are still using DSLRs, and it's a good learning camera, I think, for someone who picks up a camera for the first time. What's your whole take on it?
Well, I mean, cost of entry, obviously, at the moment is ridiculous. For somebody who wants to learn how to use a camera that has selective focus, we actually have costs of entry in the low hundreds of dollars to have a large sensor camera that shoots at 24 frames per second, that will give people the ability to learn how to do this. So, and I've always said that this form factor is not going to die because it's just another option. There's always going to be a percentage of people who are drawn to a smaller camera system. There are going to be people who need to or are drawn to a larger camera system. And then we have these strange camera systems which are existing in the world, or we think they are, that we're still trying to figure out what those cameras are and how they fit into production. But a lot of people are still using them, a lot.
Yeah, Clinton on the end there. We've seen a lot of new camera releases this year, and it's quite strange because everyone sort of started making small cameras, and then everyone went, oh, hold on, they're not really, the form factor's not good for a lot of things. So now we're seeing all these, they're almost like copycat cameras that are coming out there. They're all sort of based on a similar type of looking camera.
Yeah.
I guess if we look back and we want to be fair about it, they're all sort of based on the Alexa or the Amira, so to speak, in terms of the form factor and what everybody's looking at.
Yep.
What's your take on the release of all the latest cameras?
Look, form factor, I think they're companies that will try and emulate other companies based on what ergonomically works. That whole question about whether DSLR is dead, I think is almost a bit of, there's an irony in that, because I recently met up with the camera department from the new Fury Road movie, the new Mad Max movie, which John Seale's actually DPing. And it's surprising how many DSLRs they're actually using on set. So, you know, and it's they were shooting with the Lexus and the larger sort of cameras. But look, I mean, to answer your question, I think form factor is a big thing, but it again is based on application and use. So to say that you know, form factor is good or not, I mean, I agree with Jason. I like cameras that are small. Even with when we were using the Reds, we were trying to shrink everything. So, you know, I don't mind DSLRs. There's like I said, there's an application for it, and if it fits. And most people argue that, you know, the codec's not robust enough. But hey, if the guys on Fury Road are using it, then it, you know, it's pretty good to me. I mean, it depends, like I said, application.
Now, just quickly, because we've got limited time, Jason, you've got a clip to show us that was shot with the A7?
No, not sure.
Not with the A7?
It was purely for B-roll for me rattling along. It's just, yeah, some of my work, which is, I think I couldn't have done if it wasn't, if I didn't have DSLRs. I mean, I have larger cameras as well. But again, it's the horses for courses thing. I'll happily...
So we just might roll. Can we just roll that clip while
Roll the
Jason can
nurses
just
thing?
talk over it? We'll continue the discussion. Nobody needs to look at our ugly heads. I'm sure they'd
No,
probably like to
please.
look at some beautiful vision. So if we
At
can
some
roll that
stage.
clip now.
But I think it's still, until they make something that's perfectly sits in the middle, we're always probably going to still need something, a solid, proper thing with XLRs, something bigger, more shoulder mount, you know, closer to, you know, the Alexa really. And then for the more intimate stuff, where you really just, you want to be stealthy, you want to be intimate, you don't want to bring Hollywood to this particular location. You want something where you're, yeah, I mean, this is a project I did for Nurses Federation. We were shooting in maternity, in birthing, in humidity cribs. People are on life and death situations, emergencies.
And this is all 5D Mark III.
This is all 5D Mark III, two 5D Mark IIIs. But really super low light. There's like premature babies who are only they can't turn the lights on in the
and this is a prime example of where you couldn't have used a larger camera because of the type of work you're doing and the space
this
you're
is
doing.
like, you know, like just newborns. I can't go changing things. I can't even open blinds. I can't. There's children that are like premature babies that are only being lit by little LEDs to give them some sunlight. There's only one person allowed in the room at any one time. I can't have assistants. I can't, you know, it's cramped. You bump something, you got a big camera on your shoulder, I'm going to pull out someone's IV. You know, it's definitely times. I don't want to shoot everything with this, but there are projects where it's
now,
just
Ilya,
beautiful.
with
And
the
you get a
smaller
beautiful
cameras
look.
too.
You know?
Now we're seeing the integration up into 4K, so a lot of that's going. I mean, the GH4 will do it internally. The A7S, you need to go externally. Are we ever likely to see this being pushed into more mainstream DSLRs or more mirrorless cameras now, the ability to be able to record better codecs in 4K?
Oh yeah, absolutely. We're seeing that happening at a quick pace. Now, of course, GH4 hasn't started shipping yet, but I've already had a lot of people approach us and ask us how they can integrate it into mainstream television programs, feature films, helicopter, aerial work, all kinds of stuff like that. I think there's something really important about the small form factor of DSLRs and similar cameras in that they can get to a point now where you can still operate all of the functions the way that you might want them, and you can put a cinema lens on there and you can be able to interact with it in a way that is compact, lightweight, and reach everything. Once you get down to an even smaller format, once you get down to like the iPhone, I saw some people shooting something with an iPhone on a giant crane recently, and I thought it was somewhat ridiculous because, of course, once you get to that sort of touch screen interface and you have no control over your lens, or like nothing tactile, it actually becomes an impediment to your work. You have to have a certain amount of mass, you have to have a certain amount of size, otherwise it becomes worse. So there is sort of this magical formula, almost like, you know, the golden ratio of camera size development. I think it is somewhere between like an Epic and a DSLR, and I haven't found exactly the right thing yet, but I feel like each generation is getting closer and closer, so we're there.
Now, Jim, in terms of like what would be your ideal camera in a small form factor like that, I mean, we're getting closer to, are we getting closer to what the ideal form factor and components and codecs and quality is offering?
Yeah, I mean, I'm interested in the A7S because it'll have a small XLR attachment to it. S-Log, you know, S-Log in a
pass
DSLR.
That up, Jason, and we can.
I think that's a big deal. Yeah. So we see S-Log in the small form factor.
That's not the real one.
But one of the things that's been interesting is that some of you guys may have noticed, if you go out with a DSLR now and you try to shoot, people will actually stop you from shooting because they know you're shooting video, and that's where something like the Pocket camera is really interesting, because now we have something that's shooting compressed RAW in a point and shoot form factor, and it's actually becoming harder and harder to be able to tell a story without pulling a permit, and the Pocket camera form factor may actually solve that problem in certain situations, because if you hide a wireless receiver in your pocket and then you hide a transmitter on somebody, and that's all you have, then you can go out with a Pocket camera and you can shoot, and nobody will ever think that you're shooting video on that. And they will if they see a 5D Mark III. We're using 5D Mark IIIs as scouting cameras now, which, you know, even though sometimes we're using larger cameras, we're going out and scouting with a 5D Mark III, using it when we need that form factor. But I'm excited that these things are moving towards having S-Log and other compressed RAW, and that's really where you'll be able to start to use this form factor, as you were talking about, in features with other form factors, and then it just becomes, as it always has, another tool in the toolbox, and that's exciting.
So what does everybody think about, I mean, we look around on the show floor yesterday, today, and we're seeing all these cameras from Blackmagic, from Aja, they're all coming out with things, but they're completely moving away from the small cameras. They're making big shoulder mountable cameras. Do you think that's the correct move, or do you think that's you know, slightly odd considering what they first came out with?
Of course it's Matty. You know, I think, again, like if you're looking at, let's say, news gathering and stuff like that, you know, that's the form factor, and that's how they're used to. It's application again, you know. I mean, I was thinking when I was doing the feature and a shooting with a rig that I tried to minimize again, there were moments when I was shooting that feature and I was thinking, I wish I had a DSLR. So again, you know, the irony to say that it's dead, it's not quite dead, because I want something small where you can go into tight confined spaces. So I think it has its place. I mean, where did that come, that whole thing about DSLR is dead, you know, that's an interesting question, but I don't think it is.
Obviously it's not dead. I think it's, like you said, if it's, you're stealing a shot, you're grabbing the shot, you have to be in a place where you can't access the material. You know, we worked on Transformers 4, and Michael Bay has DSLRs all over the place. I mean, they use these things, they're great tools. They're just horses for courses, know the tool, know what they're used for. And, you know, what we're seeing now, I think, is the response of Blackmagic AJ and building the big form factor camera, because they're saying, well, we have that other solution already. Here's the next thing that works for other people, for other reasons. And I don't think it's a death of one.
But let's be serious. I mean, with this DSLR generation, whatever that is, and a lot of the people that I've been teaching since the Mark II came out, I don't think they're going to go into these larger cameras for $6,000 to $10,000 and know what the hell to do with them, because they don't shoot that way, you know, and they're so used to for so many years. I mean, I really started out shooting on smaller video, you know, camcorders like the DVX-100. So I've always had a smaller system, and I'm drawn to that because that's the way I like to shoot. Doesn't mean that DPs I hire always shoot on those cameras, but you know, that's the way I like to shoot. But I think that they're going to get one. Well, I don't know if you can put one of those two cameras on your shoulder of the ones that were released, because, well, for various reasons. But if you just take the AJA camera, the Scion, I don't, that's be a $10,000 camera system. I don't know if that's going to be the right fit for a lot of the people who have been shooting with these smaller cameras for a long time.
And Jason, do you think, the quality of small cameras now, I mean, for a lot of applications, depending on where it's getting maybe broadcast or it's only web only, that there really is a huge difference between, say, using something at the high end or using something that's, sub $3,000-$4,000. Can anybody really tell the difference?
No. I don't think so. I'm very tempted often to grab something very cheap, like I don't know, 5D Mark III or something, and make it black and white and shoot something lovely and say, look, first monochrome. This is the first monochrome epic footage, and I know everyone's just to go, oh, beautiful, fantastic, I love it, clean it. When it comes, sometimes when we're all content, we're all sort of consuming it a lot on the web. It does get a little bit harder to, disseminate. But I think, going back to your ergonomics thing, I think we're seeing this sort of a splitting of it. I think as these get better to use in a form factor like that, and you don't need to have rigs, you don't need to balance it up, and you don't need EVFs and all this sort of stuff, you're going to have something just like that for run and gun. And what we're seeing is a far more accessible versions of the proper shoulder thing. It's forking into like DSLRs, quite small, and shoulder cameras, very affordable. And I think we are seeing this sort of, it's solidifying down into that classic shape. F55, Aja, Blackmagic, everything's going into that very simple shoulder. There's a reason that stuff is designed that way. The first time anybody who's from the DSLR generation put something of that shape on their shoulder, you go, yes, there's a reason this is designed this way. And what we're doing is we're seeing a lot that is now becoming more accessible. The alternative to that was like a big F35, I guess. Now we're seeing something that the DSLR generation can adopt and afford to buy, not spend $6,000 on a rig, spend $3,000 on that and $6,000 on a decent shoulder camera and have two options.
We're talking about the ENG style shooting. I mean,
right.
You see people all over, and there's a real reason that has been the dominant form of shooting electronic news gathering. I know, Matt, you know all about it. I see people all over this trade show here, walking around in the traditional ENG style, because that is the most efficient and quickest way to get your job done. When you're working with a DSLR, you have all kinds of extra stuff that you need to bring with you. Right. And when you have it all self-contained in that package, which I kind of feel like all of these new, even if they're Super 35 sensors, are a new generation of ENG camera. They're just set up around a larger sensor and require different things, but it's still that same way of working.
Okay, we're going to have to wrap it up there. I know we could probably go on for 4 hours and talk about this panel. I know I'd like to, but we're running out of time. That's all for us at the moment. We'll be back very shortly with some more guests, including Ari.